Welcome in to Frogs Insider. Jamie Plunkett here. Melissa Triebwasser will be along in a bit as she previews the TCU Iowa State game with our good friend Levi over at Wide Right Natty Lite. We've got some other things to get into in this episode as well. As you all know by now, we're part of the Republic of Football Network. Shout out to Dave Campbell's Texas Football. Also, a big shout out to our sponsors, Hell's Half Acre Stadium Goods and Home Field Apparel. You'll hear more about them later on in the show. If you're a first-time listener, welcome to the show. We're very glad that you're here. If you've been around for a while, thank you for coming back. We say this every week, and we're thankful for it every week. The show is growing very quickly, and we're super excited. I think we're up 4 times in our listenership since the start of football season. And we've been growing prior to that as well. We grew a lot over the summer. So to everybody that's new and that has latched onto the show and started listening since the beginning of the season, we can't say thank you enough for hopping on board and being part of this thing here. For those that have been since day one, y'all are the GOATs. We know you. We love you. We're thankful for you as well. If you haven't yet, whether you've been listening since the first episode or if you just hopped on and this is your first time, please make sure you leave us a rating wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you're subscribed to the show as well so that you get it in your podcast feed. I've been noticing on the stats when I go and dig them up every week, about 30% of our listenership every episode is people who aren't subscribed to the show. Please subscribe to the show. It helps us out tremendously if you're actually signed up and subscribed to the show. So thank you for doing that in advance. If you're watching this on YouTube, by the way, make sure you like the video. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Like I said last week on the midweek show, we've got some things kind of ruminating, if you will, about what we want to do with the YouTube channel. Tell us with your subscriptions that that's something you'd be interested in. Like the videos. Go and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. It's all completely free, right? All of this stuff is completely free. Doesn't cost you a dime, just costs you a click. And it would help us out a tremendous amount. So if you want more YouTube content, hit the subscribe button over there. If you like the podcast, leave us a rating. Make sure you're subscribed over there as well. All right, now we've done all of the podcast business for the intro of this show. Like I said, Melissa will be on in a little bit. But I want to jump into a couple of things before we get into the Iowa State preview. And the first thing is that there were a couple of significant things that happened with the NCAA this week. They had a big committee meeting. They've been talking about doing a lot of different things when it comes to the transfer portal, when it comes to scholarships, and some other things as well related to visits, etc. And so they came up with a few big decisions this week that I think are pretty significant. The first one is they're eliminating the initial counter on FBS scholarships, or the annual limit on the initial counter. So essentially what that means is every school has 85 football scholarships that they can use every year. That's the max that you're allowed to have in a single season is 85 scholarship players. The old rule was you're allowed to bring in as many as 25 scholarship players in a given season during recruitment, right? And so the old way was, all right, we've got our high school recruiting cycle. We can get as many as 25 guys. You might not need that many because you had a smaller senior class. You might need more. That's kind of a bummer. But anyways, you had 25 spots maximum every year to bring in new scholarship players. They're taking that cap off, essentially, because the transfer portal has put a ton of strain on this kind of old way of doing things. And part of the reason that I think they took the cap off was if you look at how many guys enter the portal every year versus how many guys actually go to another school, it's not a high percentage. Like maybe 60% of players that enter the portal find a new school. And that's thousands of players that go into the portal with the hope of going somewhere else and have no other options, right? And part of that, I'm assuming, is because of this cap. Now, they're still only going to be able to top out at 85 total scholarship players. So it's not like Texas can just go out and get 150 scholarship players now or anything like that, but they're just pulling away the 25 cap. And I think that change needed to be made. I also am curious to see how this opens the door to some different kind of roster management strategies for some of the bigger blue blood programs in the country. I think we're going to see a lot of teams try to do essentially what Deion did at Colorado this year, which is turn over the entire roster or turn over significant portions of the entire roster. Because if you have a team that's underperforming, at least to their standards and expectations, like maybe Clemson, for one, what's to stop you from asking 35 guys to transfer? And then you bring in an awesome high school class, and then you go get 20 more guys out of the portal, and here we go, right? We've turned over our roster in a year instead of it taking 2 or 3 years like it would have in the past. So it's going to be interesting to see how schools use all of these new kind of unlimits, this unlimited kind of way of treating recruiting now to sorry, I just got a random text. We're going to back up off of that. Put my phone away. We're focused. We're locked in here. It's going to be really interesting to see how schools treat this new rule where there is no cap in the number of scholarship players you can bring in a year. I think we're going to see a bigger jump even than we have in the last few years of kids entering the portal. And the question's always going to be there now. Well, did they want to enter the portal? Or did someone tell them to enter the portal? That was always already kind of a question we could ask, but now I think it's as schools and coaches try to hold on to their jobs, I'll be interested to see what the strategy is there. This also does one thing, though, and if you're a Horned Frog Blitz subscriber, you know that this conversation happens pretty much every year now. This is going to eliminate the conversation that goes, well, we've got a smaller high school recruiting class, but that's probably because we're saving like 10, 12 spots for guys in the transfer portal. That's just not going to be a thing anymore because you don't have to worry about that 25-person cap. So I know I've seen that conversation happening on HFB this season about TCU's 2024 recruiting class, and just know that argument's not necessarily very valid anymore. If you're going to have a smaller high school class, yeah, you're probably going to load up on the portal, but that kind of version of that conversation is just not really a thing anymore. The second thing that the NCAA did was that they minimized or they reduced the window during which players can actually enter the transfer portal. It used to be 60 days. Now it's 45 days. I think this is a smaller issue or a smaller change than the annual scholarship intake limit. For hoops, it's going to be one big 45-day window. For football, there will be a 30-day window after the season ends, and for hoops, it will be, and then there will be another 15-day window in the spring. And I think I saw as well that there's a little 5-day extra window in there for teams that like make the college football playoff or have later bowls and stuff like that. So they've got it set up now to where no kid is going to be trapped at a spot, but they're also not just going to be able to hit the portal whenever they want and kind of screw over their team or their teammates. This is also just the window in which players have to formally enter the portal. This isn't a limit on when a player can commit to a school, when they have to take their visits, or all that kind of stuff outside of their normal recruiting restrictions and dead periods and all that kind of stuff. The third thing that the NCAA did was they changed the fee that a school has to pay in order to move from FCS to FBS. It used to be $5,000. Not a large fee at all, just kind of like hey, we want to do this thing, we've got to pay this fee. It's $5,000, whatever. Well, they bumped it up a little bit. It's $5 million now. And I think part of the reason for this is there's maybe an oversaturation at the FBS level of teams at the kind of lower G5 level that are maybe better suited for FCS, but they want that FBS status because of the opportunities, because of the bowl money, because of some other stuff. And I get it, right? Like there's a big financial incentive to be FBS versus FCS. And we've seen some successful teams jump from FCS to FBS pretty recently, right? Jacksonville State's a really good example. James Madison is another fantastic example of that. And then you have, Sam Houston State, who's jumped up this year, and I think they're 0-4 right now. And so it doesn't always work out. Very rarely, though, do you see a team go in the other direction. I think the most recent one was maybe Idaho that dropped down to FCS because there are huge financial implications between being an FCS program and an FBS program. But the $5 million feels a little ridiculous to me. It's basically closing the door altogether. I don't know that there's a single FCS school that has $5 million to just toss over to the NCAA to do something like this. So it feels less like we want to make it a steeper cost to get to the FBS, and more like we don't want any more teams to be FBS, which is kind of lame, especially when you consider the success stories that they've had in certain teams jumping up a level recently. But that's that. And then the last thing, the least significant thing, unless you're an employee of a team that has to deal with this on a daily basis, there are no more recruit photo shoots on unofficial visits. And I love seeing all these photos on Instagram and Twitter of kids that are on recruits, and they've got all the gear and all the unique things that different universities do to like help kids make their photo shoots look awesome. For instance, TCU baseball does a couple, I think, with Kirk Sarlos's dog every now and then, right? So they get to shoot photos with this golden retriever and stuff, which is kind of fun. But no more photos on unofficial visits. You'll still be able to do them on official visits. And I could hear team employees across the country celebrating when this ruling came out because the photos look awesome. I can't imagine the kind of pain in the ass that they are to coordinate and pull off every time a kid is trying to get an unofficial visit on your campus. Like, that is insane. A kid can just show up for an unofficial or like schedule an unofficial. Great, we've got one kid coming in. It's over a game weekend, and now he's going to want to take photos. We've got all these other responsibilities, and now we got to set up a photo shoot for this kid who, we might not even offer or we might not even take, right? And so once you get him here on an official, all of those photos can still happen. No more photos on unofficial visits. If it's good for the team managers and all the folks in the background who have to deal with that kind of stuff, it's fine with me. Moving on to the next thing. John Rothstein reported earlier this week that the Big 12 is considering going from 18 conference games in basketball to 20 conference games in basketball. And so I texted around to a few people to get some insight on this and to hear what they said, because I didn't think it was a big thing. And that was kind of the reaction that I got from several folks that I talked to. First and foremost, when you consider the fact that the Big 12 is expanding to 16 teams now, 18 conference games doesn't really make a ton of sense because you're only going to get to play two teams twice. Moving to 20 gives you a little bit more wiggle room there to play a couple teams a couple more times, keep some of those regional rivalries like TCU Baylor going, which is always nice to see. There's already a model for this too. The Big Ten is already at 20 conference games for hoops. I was told that the SEC might be going in that direction too. If they have, it isn't happening this year. They're still at an 18-game conference schedule this year, but that could be changing soon, apparently. So there already are models out there of a conference being able to do this. And when you think about it, the Big 12 has had the Big 12 SEC Challenge, the Big East Big 12 Challenge, and so you've had pretty high caliber teams coming in the non-conference schedule too. So schools are used to playing 20 to 25 really high level opponents every year anyways. So from a competition standpoint, I don't think it changes a ton. Now the Big 12 competition is maybe a little bit different than some other conferences, but I think it's good. It'll cut in, right? And TCU fans are the worst about complaining about this. It'll cut into TCU basketball's non-conference schedule. And if you look at TCU basketball's non-conference schedule this year, it's a bunch of home games against teams that, frankly, TCU just should not lose to. And so there'll be 2 fewer of those every year, which means that the Big 12 conference schedule will probably start a little bit earlier in the year in order to get all of those games in. And I think it'll just be a better situation for quality of schedule, for strength of schedule, for TCU and for every other team in the Big 12. I think 20 games is also a better way to get a little bit more schedule parity, since you won't be able to play every team twice. At least you'll play a couple more teams twice. Keep the schedule a little bit more balanced that way from team to team every single year. That'll be pretty helpful. All right, let's jump in. We're going to listen to Melissa and Levi in just a minute. But I did a little bit of a write-up on Horned Frog Blitz on Monday, and it was pretty well received. It was about some of the deeper analytics around TCU football this year. And so I wanted to kind of do like a little bit of a TCU Iowa State stats preview using the information from a good friend of mine, Parker Fleming, to just look at how he looks at the games. And so there are 2 kind of stats that I really want to call out in regards to the TCU and Iowa State matchup. And I'll retweet his graph, his advanced stat preview that he put out on this game earlier this week as well. The first one is Eckle rate. I talked about it on the last episode. I've written about it on Horned Frog Blitz now. Eckle rate is essentially a measurement of how frequently a team is putting together a quality drive on offense. And so that means a quality drive is any drive that has at least one snap within the opponent's 30. So between the opponent's 30 and their goal line. Think of it as like an extended red zone. You're extending the red zone out 10 more yards. The next thing is points per Eckle. How frequently on those quality drives are you scoring, or how many points are you averaging on your quality drives? So you've got your quality drive stat, and then the ability to convert a quality drive into points on the board. TCU is currently 18th in the country in Eckle rate. They are putting together a quality drive 55.7% of the time. That's down from 8 in the country, down from a little bit over 63% because they had 2 Eckle rate drives on Saturday against West Virginia, and they came away with no points. Out of their, I think it was 10 total drives, they only had 2 that were considered quality drives. They had 3 touchdowns. All of those came from outside the 30. So this is a measurement that helps us understand consistently putting together good drives versus explosive plays. TCU relied a lot more on explosive plays on Saturday night against West Virginia than they did on consistently stringing good drives together. TCU is now 82nd in the country in points per Eckle at 3.5. So they're 18th. They're a top 20 team in the country in stringing good drives together. They're outside the top 80 in the country in scoring on those drives. So it's just like what our eyeballs have been telling us all the time. TCU really struggles the closer they get to the goal line. Alternatively, Iowa State is very good at preventing quality drives. They're 33rd in the country in defensive Eckle rate. They're only allowing an opponent to put together a quality drive 32% of the time. And they're holding teams to less than 3 points a drive on those quality drives. So this is going to be a really important test for TCU's offense on Saturday. Can they get sustained drives? And what are they going to do to try and improve on their scoring on those drives? Explosive plays happen, right? Turnovers and special teams plays happen. What this is measuring is simply how good are you at sustaining drives and getting points versus how good are you at stopping other teams from putting together sustained drives and scoring points. So that's the TCU offense versus Iowa State's defense right there. Reversing that, and it's almost like TCU's defense and offense have been practicing together all offseason because you have a TCU defense that is 76th in the country in Eckle rate. They're allowing opponents to put together quality drives 40% of the time, but they're 22nd in points per Eckel allowed at 2.52. So they're allowing only 2.5 points per quality drive to opponents. Meanwhile, Iowa State is 121st in the country in Eckel rate. 30% of the time, they are putting together a quality drive. They're 106th in points per Eckel at 3.1 points per Eckel drive. And so there's a real opportunity here, I think, for TCU's defense to look really good and for TCU's offense to struggle. I think this is kind of where we're going to see this game play out. Iowa State's always had a good defense. We've known this. Their offense is not in great shape right now because Brock Purdy's not walking back through that door. Breece Hall's not walking back through that door. We can talk about the fact that when those two guys were seniors, they only won 8 games. But that's for another day. I'm not here to piss off Iowa State fans today. I'll save that for the internet later this week. But this has all the makings, just based on those two stats alone, of being a low-scoring rock fight kind of game. Now you factor in the fact that it's at 7 o'clock at night in Ames, that it's the annual Jack Trice Memorial Game where the Cyclones are going to come out in their honorary jerseys. They're going to be paying homage to Jack Trice, and they're going to be fired up. It's one of the hardest places to play on the road anyways. And I have some questions about this game from a TCU standpoint. I talked a little bit too on the site this week about early down rate, early down EPA, the ability to have success on first and second down. TCU's 51st in the country in early down EPA. Iowa's defense is 50th in the country. So a good defense on first and second down, or an above average defense on first and second down versus an average offense on first and second down. There might be some leeway there for TCU to really kind of step up and start to eliminate some of their third and fourth down issues that they've been having. Because the best way, and I'll say it as many times as you'll let me, the best way to convert on third down is to avoid third down altogether. And so if TCU can do that on Saturday, I think they're going to have a good chance of coming away with a victory against a really good Iowa State defense. I think TCU's defense has some success on Saturday. It's going to be up to the offense, I think, to put some things together. All right. With that, I want to tell you a little bit about Hell's Half Acre Stadium Goods. Hell's Half Acre Stadium Goods is one of the coolest TCU merch places that I've ever encountered. Go to their website, hellshalfacresg.com, and check out all the stuff they've got. They've got polos, they've got hoodies, they've got t-shirts, they've got hats, they've got koozies, they've got they got all this stuff for your tailgate, all the stuff for you to wear. All you've got to do is go to hellshalfacresg.com and you are set for any game day, more than you could be at any other place. There is no more comprehensive store out there for TCU fans in getting you ready for a game day than Hell's Half Acre Stadium Goods. Very happy that they are partners with us here on the show. Very, very excited about what they've got coming up as well. You've seen some of their awesome releases. The baseball and football polos were absolutely great. Baseball started fall practice this week. Might be time to go scoop up one of those polos and get ready for the spring season. But hey, let me tell you, they've got some hats that are almost always on back order because they're so popular, and I'm gonna have to sit there and just refresh the website, I think, until I can snag one of these awesome hats. But they've got everything you need, so go check them out at Hell's Half Acre Stadium Goods, hellshalfacresg.com. All right, let's jump in to Melissa's preview of Iowa State. She sits down with Levi Stevenson of Wide Right Natty Lite. Let's go into that right now.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another midweek edition of the Frogs Insider podcast. Proud to be a part of the Dave Campbell's Republic of Football Network. I don't know if proud is the word I'm going to go for. Terrified, excited, concerned, all of the feelings that I have that are in the middle of the emotional scale, to be joined by my good friend, my favorite Iowa State fan, sorry, Cyclone Larry, and one of the just best people that I know, Levi Stevenson, of Wide Right Natty Lite, one of the absolute best non-TCU sports blogs in all of the planet, and honestly probably better than most of the TCU ones too. Who are we kidding? So Levi, listen,
I'm not sure how I'm supposed to respond to that intro.
Yeah, I mean, but also not wrong whatsoever. Yeah, it's Levi and I have quite a great history together. We have enjoyed many a tailgate together on opposite sides, and mourning our football teams and celebrating our football teams and talking about what a dick Parker is. So all of the things. I'll know for real if Parker actually listens to this podcast now, but today.
Yeah, there you go. So sometimes you just got to throw a shot in there. Sometimes I just got to throw a shot in there at Count Graffula.
Count crap. That's a good one. There are all so many good. We could honestly just turn this into it. Let's just crap on Parker podcast. But I do love my dear friend Parker Fleming as well. But that's what I'm here to talk about, Parker. And God forbid we talk too much about advanced stats, because these two teams, that doesn't get good for either of them. No. What we are here to talk about is TCU traveling to Ames this weekend to take on Iowa State, a place the Horned Frogs have not won since 2015. And if you want to throw just a little more fuel into the fire, we're going to talk about why this game is especially important for Cyclone players and fans. And I think you're wearing a shirt that might represent a little bit of that as well, Levi, it looks like. So we'll get into all that. But the first thing I want to, you texted me earlier this week as I was inviting you on the podcast. And I think the direct quote was, "What is TCU?" And I answered that about how I expect you to answer, but I'm going to turn the favor around since we are previewing the Cyclones. What exactly is Iowa State in 2023, and how much does Matt Campbell regret not leaving for the NFL a couple of years ago?
The answer to the first question is I have no idea.
Okay.
I don't know. The second answer to that question is that Matt Campbell is a college football coach through and through. I think he would hate the NFL. I thought that in 2018 when we were trying to bargain with, he's never leaving. He hates the NFL, and I still believe that now when probably nobody's calling him for the NFL at this point in time or whatever. Like I still believe. I think he would hate the NFL. It's just not his thing. He'd rather be I genuinely, in my heart of hearts, believe he'd rather be a high school football coach than an NFL football coach every day of the week.
Yeah,
if he wasn't in college, he'd rather be in high school. No question about it.
But to circle back on the off-season issues among the Cyclones are well documented. We don't need to get into all of the players that are not a part of the team due to gambling and other issues.
It's funny you brought that up though, is because there was some development in that today where the NCAA just. Well, we might have been a little heavy-handed with our punishments. Oh, well, thanks for changing that after Jake Remsburg and Deshaun Haneke. Jake Remsburg has already lost 5 games of this season out of a 6-game suspension, and now you're going to change it.
Yeah, you and Oklahoma State have a lot to complain about the NCAA together.
And Deshaun Haneke, but the problem is Oklahoma State's thing was a former Iowa player, so fuck him. But and then Deshaun Haneke was ruled out for the season. Well, all of a sudden now they're going to change it and they're going to retroactively change the suspensions. Like, how are you going to give Deshaun Haneke 6, 7, 8 games back? Like, what's your game plan for that? Besides an extra year of eligibility, which both of them should absolutely get an extra year of eligibility at this point.
But we know that probably won't happen. So.
No, it's just the NCAA's incompetence is mind bending, and they just find new ways to surprise all of us.
But that's a whole other separate podcast.
It is a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
Honestly, this whole gambling investigation is going to make a fantastic documentary someday. I don't know.
Oh, absolutely.
I put it in our Slack today. I was like, dude, I wish we had the resources. I would interview people from the DCI, from the NCAA, from everything, because they had the DCI. We don't need to keep going into it, but I'd keep doing free. I would FOIA the shit out of every DCI email sent in the last 8 months, like crazy. Like the whole situation is completely batshit crazy, and we're not at the end of it. We're not going to be at the end of it for a while, but I will be fascinated to read a book about this whole thing at some point in time, because this is
be pretty epic.
If you're not directly involved in it, like Iowa State fans have been, you're looking at it from the outside probably and thinking like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Like hasn't affected me, because I don't know, does Texas have legal sports gambling?
I don't think it's passed yet. I think it's not.
It's on the table, but so like somebody from Texas would be like, oh, that's kind of weird. It doesn't really apply because we can't gamble in Texas or something like that. But I can assure you that what's happening right now with this whole thing and how the NCAA is handling this and how the Department of Criminal Investigation is handling this is absolutely a monumental landmark in that's going to go in the history of the timeline of college football and how this whole thing shakes out over the next 100 years. or whatever. This is a signpost in that story.
It's funny that you think college football will be around in 100 years, but that's
dude,
a whole other.
I'm on the record saying by 2050 this shit's gone.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Let's talk about what is actually here. And I guess for those of you guys, if you haven't figured out, keeping Levi under the explicit number per episode is always a struggle, but we're just going to let him cook. So I'm not going to worry about it. I apologize to my friends at Dave Campbell's Texas Football. Sorry, Mike and Ish, but get the censor ready. Let's talk about.
I'll write a letter for their apology.
Yeah, perfect. Good. Let's talk about what's going on the field. So obviously, Iowa State has had some great players, both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. They've brought in they've recruited at a relatively high level, especially compared to previous years. And now they're in ostensibly a rebuild, right? Like year 2 of kind of a rebuild after losing some generational talent, guys that are playing in the NFL. One of whom, Brock Purdy, who has become one of the elite quarterbacks, and as a 49ers fan, couldn't be happier. But
having Brock Purdy as your quarterback is the absolute best.
Having this version of Brock Purdy as your quarterback is
to
absolutely.
Be honest, we had like the chaotic college version. Yes. It was still fun.
Yeah, it was still fun. It was fun. You always knew it was going to be fun, but now it's in a Shanahan system. Like no quarterback has ever been more tailor made to be successful in that system.
Like right now,
Brock,
if you're doing an NFL QB power rankings right now, Brock's probably in your top 5.
Oh, for sure. He's like, so efficient, so delightful.
Good.
Yeah. So again, neither here nor there. But let's talk about what's going on the offense. I know that you have lots to say about the offensive line, but before we get to that position, they've played a couple of quarterbacks. JJ Cole is one of those super highly touted young guys who's gotten just a handful of snaps. I think he's 8 for 9 though in completions, but for only 17 yards. Rocco Becht has kind of been the guy this year after the failed experiment of a year ago. I can't even remember his name, but
Deckers, yeah.
I really miss Hunter Deckers. But as do all opposing fan bases.
That's one of us.
Yeah. But what do you see? Rocco's he's a young kid. He's a highly touted kid. He's got NFL bloodlines and lineage, great genetics. What have you seen from him so far? And what is kind of your expectation for him on Saturday against the TCU defense that has shown some weaknesses, but has been relatively good in the passing game since week 1 of the season? And is he kind of a long-term answer for Iowa State going forward?
It's kind of funny because before the season, we were all in like Rocco will start the first few games and then JJ will jump in. And then that's just now it's JJ's program type of thing. Cause JJ is he's a high 4-star guy, you know, on the bottom end of the 5-star. He's just, got a lot of raw talent there. But what we found out now is that one, JJ in the limited snaps that JJ's gotten, he's raw. He's a freshman. He's not ready. What we also found out is that Rocco is way better than we thought he was. He has been very, very efficient. He's a good decision maker. He is kind of, I hate to dump this on them because it's like, it's an unfair comparison, but he is his play style is very, very reminiscent of Brock Purdy. Very, very reminiscent of Brock Purdy. Not as much of a runner, not as much of a creative runner like Brock was. Like you're not gonna see him like roll out and then pump fake somebody and then just magically show up 10 yards downfield type of thing. But as far as a passer goes, he's elusive within the pocket. He does a really good job of climbing through the pocket. As he goes through his progressions, he does a fantastic job of avoiding pressure. I think I would say it's only given up like 2 sacks on the season, and they were just in the last like 2 weeks. And he's been much better than people thought he was. He's thrown 4 picks, I think, on the year. The first 2 were absolutely not his fault. Not even a little bit. Receivers slipped on both of them. Last week he threw a bad pick to start the game, and then came back and hit Jalen Knoll on like a 60-yard bomb or whatever it was. And then later in the game, towards the end of the half, he tried kind of forcing it as they were trying to push it downfield. He tried forcing it a little bit, which is a freshman mistake. He is just a redshirt freshman, so you're going to expect him to make some freshman mistakes at times. But he's played largely beyond his years. He's very efficient. One thing that I've really enjoyed about him that I wish that we could have gotten more out of Brock Purdy is that he keeps an eye on downfield receivers. He's a more willing thrower down the football field than Brock typically was. And definitely more than Hunter Deckers was, which is mind blowing to me because Hunter Deckers, for all of his many, many faults, it has a huge arm. So I was surprised that we didn't get him throwing the ball down the field more. But Rocco is doing a good job. He's not forcing it, generally speaking, and his deep balls have been pretty decent. But he keeps an eye downfield, and that's why Iowa State has hit has had 350 plus yard touchdown catches in the last 2 games. For some, suddenly the Iowa State passing game is kind of an explosive passing game. And they're actually kind of leaning on it, which is what we've been asking for years now.
Well, you talk about them leaning on it, and it's because the thing that we've been seeing Iowa State be super successful at over the last few years, the running game has been, can I say atrocious?
Horrendous.
Yeah, it's been really, really bad. And when you've had some of the guys that you've had in the backfield, they're lining up, a couple of guys that are in the
Turns
NFL
out
now.
not having Dave Montgomery and Breece Hall is not as good as having either of them.
You've got nobody is averaging more than 37 yards a game on this this Iowa State backfield.
And part of that is a product of the fact that they're playing like 3 or 4 guys most games. Yeah. So they're splitting it up fairly evenly.
But still less than 100 yards per contest as a whole.
Oh yeah, it's still a terrible running game. But the whole like individually low averages is a lot due to the share of carries getting and touches being dispersed. But yeah, it's a terrible running game. But and the reason Iowa State lost to Ohio is because they can't run the ball, but for whatever reason they were still stuck in this old Tom Manning mode where they had to establish the run. Kill me. But but they decided before the Oklahoma State, we actually heard it in press conferences, like we've realized that this team can throw the football or whatever, and we're really struggling with running the football. So we're going to adjust what we're doing, and we're going to change our focus on offense. So now they're throwing on first down, and they're throwing halfback screens, which we hadn't seen since, we hadn't seen screens in a while. And even when Breece Hall was here, they didn't really throw that many screens. They threw him to David, but not as many to Breece. But, those finally made a return. They're doing a really good job of scheming open tight ends and receivers, especially receivers downfield. They're doing a much better job of that. And they're using the pass game to open up the running game. Again, still a bad running game. But we saw it against Oklahoma that, especially towards the end of the game, when Oklahoma was having to spread their defense out more and they couldn't stack the box every time, suddenly there's a few more running lanes. And now the individual offensive linemen are still pretty much terrible across the board. If you don't have to defend against 9 defenders all the time, you don't have to block 9 defenders all the time, then it's a lot easier to run the football, even with a bad offensive line. So I think they finally started realizing that, and that's why Iowa State has been a much more pass-heavy team the last couple of weeks, and why they've really tried to take advantage of the explosive passing game, especially hitting like backside posts and stuff like that, which Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins have both taken to the house over the last couple of weeks. That kind of stuff is what you do as a counter to when safeties start coming up and when they start compressing that middle of the field to stop a running game or to stop an underneath passing game or whatever it is. They're doing a good job. It does seem like Nate Scheelhaas is getting more comfortable calling an offense and doing so in a way that that he wants to call it, rather than just trying to maintain the status quo.
What do you think? So where's the disconnect getting? So it seems like that they're starting to kind of get in the flow, that they're starting to move the ball. The passing game's been pretty effective, still struggling really to put points on the board. I mean, Oklahoma State, 34 points. Oklahoma State is so bad. And then UNI is the only other time that they've topped 30. Now, obviously Oklahoma's defense is really good. There's some bad positioning there. Teams drops 50 on you. Some things had to go wrong on both sides of the ball. You already talked a little bit about the Ohio game, and then, Iowa's defense is solid, but is this, we look at TCU and say TCU is really great between the 20s, but struggles in the red zone. Is it the same kind of thing as the field gets smaller? Are they struggling to punch it in, or is there something else going on that's kind of preventing them from putting up bigger numbers, in some of these losses?
I don't think there's a disparity between how they move the ball between the 20s and at the red zone. It's pretty much terrible all over the place. But no, it's really more of, it's been better the last couple games too. I mean, like you said, Oklahoma's defense is very good. But it's been better where the situational play calling is better, but there's still times where, I mean, when the way in the current state of the running game, you kind of almost have to assume that you're not going to get anything, which is a very unfortunate sentence to have to say.
Yeah.
But you pretty much have to assume that you're going to get 0 yards, and then whatever you get beyond that is fine. So, but there's been a few different times where drives have stopped because for whatever reason they get to they get to like 2nd and 8 or 2nd and 6, and then they run the ball. Well, okay, now it's 3rd and 7. Congratulations. Now you're behind the sticks and you've got to throw against a defense that knows you're throwing. So there's some situational play calling is not great. Again, not having a running game sucks.
Yeah.
Like it just makes everything harder. And fortunately, they're trying to work around that where they can create a running game through the passing game. But it's kind of one of those things. Sometimes there's some mental errors and stuff like that. Obviously, the receivers have had a little bit of a drops problem this year as well. What we're seeing, I mean, it's just the mental mistakes and things like that. You guys being a little out of position, whatever it is. It's a lot of the hallmarks of a really, really young football team.
Mm.
Iowa State was a very old football team in 2020 and 2021, which is why, in 2020 they won the Fiesta Bowl and all that. There were lots and lots of experience and lots of snaps on the field on both sides of the ball for a number of years there. And then all of a sudden Iowa State got really young, really, really fast. And that's not such a big deal if you have lots of 4 and 5 star talent on the depth chart, but Iowa State's a developmental program, so getting really young, really fast hurts, and that's part of that's a lingering effect from the COVID year, where a bunch of guys stuck around that they weren't expecting to stick around, so that stunts growth a little bit in the depth chart. They can't get young guys snaps early on like they usually like to, whatever it is. So I would say it's just a really, really young football team right now. I mean, your quarterback's is a redshirt freshman. 2 of your running backs are true freshmen. Your tight end's a true freshman. Your middle linebacker's a true freshman. They're playing a lot of youth on both sides of the ball, and it's just right now they look like a really young football team.
Well, and you say that, you look at some of the statistics, they're converting just 30% of their third downs, really good on fourth down, but have only attempted 7 fourth down conversions. And that does speak to having a lot of third and long situations. My favorite stat, though, is that your punter, Tyler Perkins, has attempted 30 punts already. Jordy Sandy has less than half of that for TCU at 14. And that that speaks to the slog. Let's flip it over to the other side of the ball. And talk about defense. The hallmark of Iowa State has been they're going to run you to death and they're going to make things really, really difficult on your offense. TCU, as I said, has moved the ball really well between the 20s and has done a pretty good job of those explosive plays. But we saw what West Virginia was able to do Saturday night and really stifling the Horned Frogs, holding them to just 1 yard in the third quarter, which was obscene, and putting them in a lot of bad situations in that second half as they kind of were able to come out with a win in Fort Worth, surprising a lot of folks. Iowa State's defense is probably not the stalwart that it's been the last couple of years, but still can make things difficult. Oklahoma game aside and Oklahoma State game aside, maybe it's just things in Oklahoma. This is a team that has given up 10 points, 20 points, and 9 points outside of its 2 Big 12 opponents. What do you expect them to be able to do against TCU's offense Saturday in Ames?
Yeah, the two Oklahoma-based opponents are one. Oklahoma is just really good. I think we were all underselling how good Oklahoma was at the beginning of the year. And Oklahoma, for whatever reason, I don't know. Mike Gundy has always been able to move the ball against Iowa State for whatever reason. He's just always been able to figure it out. But like you said, it's not the top 10, borderline top 5 defense in college football like we've seen in the last couple years. But it's still a very solid defense that has a really, really good secondary for once. Once Jack Haycock's defense is actually led by the secondary, which is kind of an unusual thing. Usually it's led by the linebacking core, especially. But the linebackers are young. The one linebacker that isn't young is Gary Vaughn. He's a 6th-year senior and he can't stay healthy. So currently your middle linebacker is Jack Sadowski. He's a true freshman. And then your outside linebacker is Will McLaughlin, who's a true sophomore. And then your defensive line, turns out losing Will McDonald is not great.
Yeah, that'll do it.
He's pretty good. So they've at times the defensive line has struggled to get some pressure. They struggled last week, obviously, against Oklahoma. Oklahoma took lots and lots of deep shots. Partially, really, honestly, mostly due to the fact that they were just struggling to get pressure on Dylan Gabriel. And when you give Dylan Gabriel in the Oklahoma offense 6 seconds to throw every time, you're going to have a bad time, no matter how good your secondary is. Part of it, too, though, Malik Verdon has been out the last couple of weeks, and he's a very, very good safety. They pair up with Bo Freeler and Jeremiah Cooper back there, especially a very, very good run defender. He's been out the last couple of weeks, and that has made Ben Nickel, who is a former walk-on turned scholarship player, has been playing there, and he's okay. He's been hit very, very hit or miss, and he's made some plays. been out of position a few different times, which has led to some big explosive runs just by being out of position and things like that, which are very atypical of a John Haycock defense. Having Malik Verdon back this week, which we heard he will be back this week, is a big boon, especially for slowing down a running game, especially since Iowa State's defense is predicated on the safeties coming down and stopping the run game at the line of scrimmage, basically when the line spills it to the outside. So having a very, one of your best run stopping safeties back, huge boost there. Helps take care of that running game quite a bit better. And then, no offense to TCU, but they probably don't have quite as many downfield threats as Oklahoma does. And it's just one of those things where Iowa State's defense is typically predicated on stopping the big play and slowing down the run and really just making it, you got to be fine with going 4 yards at a time down the field type of thing. And I expect them to be better this week. I think we'll see a more significant attempt, I guess, to get pressure on the quarterback a little bit this week, maybe bringing some more exotic blitzes with the linebackers, things like that, to really try to get a lot of pressure over there and hopefully get the ball out of his hands fairly quickly. And then when you can do that and you have those safeties that can come up and tackle near the line of scrimmage and that are very, very solid tacklers, especially Will Freeler and Jeremiah Cooper are both excellent open field tacklers. So being able to lean on that secondary is very good. And then obviously you have TJ Tampa back there on one side, Miles Purchase on the other side. TJ Tampa is a outstanding corner. If you don't know his name already,
you will by Saturday night.
Yeah, you'll figure it out. It was fun. The funny part is at the end of the Oklahoma State game, as smart as Gundy is on offense, he decided to throw at TJ Tampa 3 times in a row on their last drive and didn't work out. TJ Tampa picked it off and won the game. But it's just one of those things. Like I said, even the defense is really young. So we'll see. Hopefully they can kind of shore things up a little bit. Last week, like I said, having Malik Verdon back is going to help a lot. But in the end, I still think it's probably going to be kind of a slugfest on Saturday because you are not allowed to have fun playing football against Iowa State. So
you are not.
Nope.
It'll be interesting because TCU definitely has a wealth of downfield threats. They have not been able to establish them, partially because of how bad
that's the
offensive line has been. Yeah. I mean, and guys haven't been healthy. There's been a lot of injuries in the wide receiver room too, but can they exploit those downfield threats? I mean, TCU scored, on a 59-yarder to JP Richardson on one of the second play of the game, and then hit Jalen Robinson, I think. I can't remember which one, for another big play, but that's kind of the only way TCU can score is on the big play. And if Iowa State's able to do that and shut down Imani Bailey, it's going to make for a really long night, especially if that offensive line struggles as much as they did against West Virginia. But West Virginia has a great defensive front, but we're down to mostly second stringers by that fourth quarter, and Chandler Moore still he's totally spooked, and for good reason, because he was getting hit. It felt like every time he dropped back. I want to talk about Jack Trice. I told you we were going to try to keep this to 40 minutes. I still don't know if I believe that it's possible, but I haven't really eaten today. And so I'm really trying to keep this to a 40-minute podcast. So I'm very hungry. Yeah. But Saturday, and the reason I am mostly terrified of this game has absolutely nothing to do with what's happening on the field. But I started reading quotes from the Iowa State players about what it means to play on a day in a game dedicated to Jack Trice. This also gives us a chance to shout out one of our podcast sponsors, Home Field Apparel, who makes killer bomber jackets, amazing t-shirts, fleeces, joggers, everything, and made just a Jack Trice bomber jacket that's absolutely exceptional for Iowa State this offseason. Frogs in 15 will get you 15% off of your purchases, not on the bomber jackets, but on everything else. Tell us, for those who don't know, can you, and it's going to be a challenge, Levi, can you give us the elevator pitch of who Jack Trice is and why it's so important that Iowa State has named their stadium after him, and B, that he is being honored this weekend?
So the Cliff Notes version here. So Jack Trice was the first ever black athlete at Iowa State. He's the first black football player. And when he was a very good one too, as defensive lineman, which is funny because he was like 185 pounds on the roster back when defensive linemen were, 50 pounds. I had 50 pounds on the average defensive lineman. He was played the offensive line too. But he was, they played a game up at Minnesota, and during the game, he suffered injuries during the game. He got trampled. There's not a lot of details on it just because it's the 20s and there's, not great records on a lot of that stuff, but he was trampled during the game and sustained some injuries. And then, eventually he ended up passing away from his injuries. For there was a period there for a long time that his story kind of was forgotten a little bit. Not because people didn't care, but it was just because, through the decades, stories get passed down. Some stories get passed down more effectively than others, whatever it is. And then eventually it kind of came back up. It came back up, a few decades later. And eventually after some, a great effort from the students themselves, finally got what was previously Cyclone Stadium renamed to Jack Trice Stadium. And now it is the only stadium in college football named after a black person. And it's a thing that Iowa State wears with pride. And especially because he is so significant to the history of Iowa State. And I would encourage you to go there's tons and tons of good stuff online about Jack. We have an entire Jack Trice resource database on our website, on our front page. That's right there. You can click it and it's got every article you could ever possibly want as far as learning about Jack. Spencer Hall wrote a phenomenal piece. It's a while ago now, like maybe 5 years ago or something like that, called Buffalo. That's about Jack Trice, and an outstanding article that he wrote there. There's lots, and I'm leaving out a lot. There's a lot of details.
There's a lot. Absolutely. It's worth reading about Jack Trice.
100%. It's an amazing story. It's a tragic story. But now they're here. So this weekend is the Jack Trice Memorial Game. Basically, they're memorializing Jack Trice and really honoring his legacy. So Iowa State is wearing throwback uniforms this weekend, which
they're
beautiful.
Unbelievable.
They're
God, the helmets,
beautiful.
The Ames helmet is the most perfect helmet in college football.
It's beautiful. Like I could not be happier with how that went. Cause like we tried Jack Trice throwbacks in 2014 and they weren't great. And there's lots of teams that have tried to pull off the throwback brown pants that everybody used to wear, and they nailed it. They did. They don't look bad
beautiful.
at all. It's a gorgeous uniform, and you guys will see it on Saturday too. It's a beautiful, beautiful uniform that I think is exactly what they wanted to accomplish with that. And it's a night game, which I was hoping it was going to be a night game.
I was hoping it wasn't, but
just because, partially because, it's a big thing with the cool uniforms, it's a big thing. And also Jack Trice at night is kind of wacky. So it's kind of one of those things, like the environment is going to be there's going to be a lot of energy in Jack Trice Stadium. I'm really excited for it. It's going to be a special day. There'll be lots of stuff, especially during the broadcast. I'm sure they will have lots of stuff about Jack during the broadcast, and then you'll see the uniforms, and I'm expecting the stadium to have a lot of energy on Saturday, even for an Iowa State team that's not, hasn't been all that great this season. This is just one of those games. I think it just means more. The meaning of the game goes far beyond whatever the final score is on Saturday. And it's just going to be a big weekend no matter what.
I read some of the quotes about some of these players talking about what it means to wear Jack Trice on their chest this weekend and why it was so important to them. And let me say, it did not inspire excitement or confidence in me as a TCU supporter. I think the environment's going to be incredible. I think this is, like you said, I think TCU is the better football team, but you cannot not account for what these emotional moments to be like. So it should be really fascinating. And like you said, really great environment, really cool, amazing, tragic story. But something I hope TCU fans will take some time to learn a little bit about Jack Trice before kickoff on Saturday night.
It's worth taking some time just to learn about, because it's a remarkable and tragic story that it's just everybody in college football should know who Jack Trice is and his story and why he's important.
Yeah, I completely agree. All right. With all that being said, what happened Saturday night in Ames, Levi? How does Iowa State, if Iowa State wins, what went right? If Iowa State loses, what went wrong?
Okay. So if Iowa State wins, what went right is the passing game was effective, and they used the passing game to open up the running game. Running back, you'll definitely see him on Saturday, and one you'll want to remember, his name is Abu Sama. He's a true freshman out of Southeast Polk. He is which is by Des Moines for anybody.
Yeah, I was going to say, you better clarify it's Iowa geography.
It's right outside of Des Moines, if anyone doesn't know their Iowa geography. But, he's a really special talent. He's young, but he's a special talent. And he's a guy that we saw it last week, they used the passing game. It opened up a couple holes for him, and he busted off for a long run against Oklahoma. If it went well, the defense has shored up. They're getting some pressure on Chandler Morris. Malik Verdon him being back is helping bottle up the running game, and then on offense, the passing game is working. They maybe they can hit a couple deep balls, and that they're using that to open up a running game and to get more consistent movement down the field. If they don't win, then it's because the offensive line is still really, really bad, and TCU's, even if TCU's defensive line isn't as where they would want it to be, and they're still getting pressure anyways. And if the running game truly just cannot get anything going, no matter what the passing game is doing, or if Rocco turns the ball over, whatever it is, that's what's going to go wrong if Iowa State loses on Saturday. This feels like one.
Are you willing to put a prediction on this one?
I'm going to put a prediction on it. So this feels like a game where it's going to be close for the whole thing. I'm going to predict 27-20 Iowa State, because this feels like one of those games where Iowa State might score to go up a touchdown in the fourth quarter, and then TCU is going to be kind of marching up the field, and they throw it TJ Tampa one too many times. He picks it off, seals the game, and it's totally fucking Energy City in Jack Trice, and that just feels like that could be this Saturday.
I certainly would not be surprised to see that happen. I think winning in Ames is always tough. TCU is obviously struggling a little bit right now. It was a pretty gut punch loss on Saturday against West Virginia. Iowa State can rally after that just disheartening loss to Oklahoma. But the stadium, the atmosphere in Ames is really going to carry the day, I fear, and I hope I'm wrong. Where can people find your work, Levi, and all the cool stuff that you are doing? You crazy, bat out of hell folks over at Wide Right Natty Lite.
Yeah, so it's widerightnattylite.com. On Twitter, it's widertnattylt. We've got the Instagram page isn't getting updated as much as it was, but we might do that at some point. Otherwise, we've got our YouTube channel. We're going to be starting here in about 10 minutes. The Nightcap on Wednesday nights, and that's live on YouTube, and I think it goes to Twitter as well, and Facebook. Yeah. We've got a couple podcasts each week. We've got a lot of stuff now. We've got our Discord server. If you're not already in our Discord server, I highly recommend it. We're over 1,000 members now, and it's a very active server. I highly recommend it. If you're into the forums or anything like that, you'll like Discord. It's just an instant messaging version of an old school forum. That's all.
And you will love Iowa State Twitter outside of game week. Oh. You guys are a blast outside of game week for the most part. I don't know if everyone agrees with me, but
there are times when Iowa State Twitter wears on me a little bit.
It can be a lot. Well, like a cultivated group of, I very much cultivate my opposing fan base. Yeah. Iowa State Twitter is great.
Yeah, you can cultivate your version of Iowa State Twitter. I have to choose my own adventure.
Yeah, ain't that the truth? Levi, thank you so much for taking some time to jump on. We kept this under 40 minutes. I've got 90 seconds left in the Zoom. That is a miracle.
Just for you.
I really appreciate it. It's just because I need to eat. And you've got to get to the nightcap.
Your name was Andy Mitz, and this was a Kansas podcast.
Oh my God.
For another hour.
We'd have I'd have to upgrade to pro just to finish the podcast. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to what is certain to be just an ulcer-inducing Saturday night. It's going to be really cool. I'm glad that TCU gets to be a part of the Jack Trice celebration and honoring. I'm also incredibly disappointed TCU is a part of the Jack Trice honoring because I know what it's going to mean for the football game. But definitely will be tuning in. I know TCU fans will be watching with bated breath for the entire 60 minutes of football being played.
Awesome. Thank you, Levi, for your time. Thank you, Melissa, for breaking down the game with him. Great preview right there. Very much looking forward to this game. TCU's a 6.5-point favorite right now, which that's kind of getting back into what we were talking about. I'm just not sure. Maybe, but we'll have to wait and see. But while you're waiting for Saturday, go ahead and head over to homefieldapparel.com. Homefieldapparel.com, purveyor of the softest shirts and hoodies that I have ever experienced in my life. You guys know how much I love my Big Sky hoodie. I'm about to go throw it on because we're going to get a little bit of fall weather here in the state of Texas, and that thing is going to be stuck to my body. I'm going to be wearing it so much because I love it that much. Frogs in 15 will get you 15% off your first purchase at Homefield Apparel. That's Frogs IN15. To get 15% off your first purchase. The best thing about that code, though, is that you can use it again and again and again. And after that first purchase, it's going to get you 10% off every subsequent purchase that you make on the website. So it's a code that you can go back to time and time again for every time they re-release some TCU gear. you can go and use that Frogs in 15 code over at homefieldapparel.com and get yourself some really, really cool TCU gear. Okay. We're going to do this section really quickly because we got some good mailbag questions that I want to give some time to today. But I want to tell you guys the 3 games that I am watching this week. The first game, it's going to sound a little crazy because it's not the Red River Shootout. I won't be watching Texas and Oklahoma. I might be watching Texas and Oklahoma. But I don't know. The game that I'm really interested, though, in the 11 o'clock time slot is 2-3, somehow still ranked LSU, heading up to play 5-0, ranked not ranked below them, ranked Missouri. Missouri is ranked. They've beaten Memphis by 7 points. They've beaten Kansas State on a record-setting field goal. They beat, I believe it was Middle Tennessee State by like 4 points. And here they are, 21st in the country, hosting LSU. LSU's offense put up 48 in a loss. Defense isn't where it needs to be for them, but I think that their offense is potent enough to come away with the win. LSU's a 5.5-point favorite in this game. I don't know if they cover, but I think they come away with the win there. I'm very excited to watch that football game because I just don't know what LSU is in Brian Kelly's second year. And you guys want to talk, this is a tangent, you guys want to talk about TCU in year 2. Let's talk about LSU in year 2, right? They've had some setbacks and some stepbacks as well, and they brought back quite a bit of talent on both sides of the football, including their quarterback from last year. And so just because you have a certain level of success in year 1, that doesn't guarantee you anything for year 2. It's a different team. We're seeing that with LSU just as clearly as we're seeing that with TCU this year. Just something to consider as we move along. The next game that I am very much looking forward to here is Washington State traveling to UCLA, because I think this is still the Washington State revenge tour. They are 4-0. They're ranked 13th in the country, and they're traveling to a 3-1 UCLA, who somehow is still a 3.5-point favorite in this game. And I am so ready for Washington State to get the respect that they deserve on the football field because they have been nothing but awesome all year. Cam Ward has been phenomenal. They've been airing it out. It's been incredible to see. I love their head coach. And they've been in this like weird fight with Pat McAfee and ESPN as of late, where ESPN's just decided that they are going to dump all over Washington State. Pat McAfee's yelling about why they have their flag at game day and all this other stupid crap. Like, they've had their flag at every single game day since 2003, and that's badass. They didn't have a game day show up in Pullman until 2018. 15 years of making sure that their flag was at every single game day. It's like the most college football thing I've ever heard. It's so cool. And now Pat McAfee, who's like some weird, loud, argumentative guy who doesn't really have great sports, at least doesn't really have great college football takes in my opinion, but he's out there and he's just yelling on stage. It feels like a completely different game day to me. Stephen Godfrey did a phenomenal job writing about this situation over at Washington Post. I retweeted that article on what was it, Wednesday. Go and read it. It's awesome. I think there's a link that you can sign up to give him specifically credit for having written the article. Puts it into really good perspective. Just kind of talking about the whole, hey, ESPN employees are kind of shitting on Washington State and calling that, they called the Oregon State-Washington State game the No One Cares Bowl or the No One's Gonna Watch Bowl or whatever, or No One Wants Them Bowl, one of those things. It's almost like watching ESPN largely be responsible for breaking up the Pac-12 and then pointing and laughing at the remnants of the Pac-12 and starting fights with their fan base. It's a little ridiculous to me. Anyways, I'll be watching Washington State beat the pants out of UCLA. They're gonna put it on them, I have a feeling, and I will be very happy when that does happen. The third game that I'm looking forward to, mostly because I think I know how it's gonna go, but I really, really hope it's just as chaotic and horrible as possible, is the Butt Bowl. We got Baylor 2-3 hosting Texas Tech at 2-3. Both of these schools only have one FBS win apiece, and now they have to play football against each other, which means someone at some point is going to get their second FBS win of the season. I'm very excited to see how this game goes because TCU still plays both of these teams. A week ago, you could have told me that both of these were going to be wins on TCU's future schedule. But after this past Saturday, where Baylor has this huge comeback against Central Florida in the fourth quarter and Texas Tech kind of blows the doors off of Houston, while TCU's losing to West Virginia, has me questioning a lot of my reality. So I want to see which of those two teams can come out and look as good as they did at points in their previous game. But I'm looking forward to watching the Butt Bowl and all of the chaos that will undoubtedly come with that. So those are the three games that I'm watching this week. Tech's favored by 1.5, even though the game is in Waco. All right, here we go. It is mailbag time. Let's do a time check. All right, we got to speed this thing up. Here we go. Hyperfrog. With these 4-star guys that are getting recruited everywhere, how much does NIL money factor into their decision of where to go? Is it 90%, 50%, 10%? Would be anxious to know if at this point the only thing that matters is money. I think it depends on the kid. Just like with everything else, right? Like some kids like the academic side of a school. Some kids really love the coaches. Some kids love the fact that they play in a 100,000 person stadium. Some people will make NIL based decisions for their future. I don't know that I have a necessarily have a percentage of who chooses where for why. I do think that we have some pretty clear examples of kids taking NIL offers and making that the main reason that they go to a school. Jaden Rashada and his $13 million commitment to Florida is a pretty good one, but we also know how that one ended. And so I think it's always going to just vary by kid. But it's also, I think, a little naive to assume that some kids just won't be in it for the money. You never know how long your professional or your athletic career is going to last. And to forego some financial stability or some income maybe isn't going to be the wisest decision for a lot of kids. And a lot of kids will go into college with the full understanding that, hey, this is probably going to be the last 3 or 4 years that I played this sport. So I'm going to do what I can to make the most money that I possibly can in these next 3 or 4 years. And I don't fault a kid for that at all. Mickey Dislick. Of course, share only what you can, but what's the sentiment inside the team? There's been a lot of conjecture on the board about team energy and chemistry. Obviously, I know the guys don't like to lose, but what's their mentality with a lot of the team's goals still ahead of them? I think that last part's the most important part. A lot of the team's goals are still ahead of them. They're 1-1 in conference right now, right? 3-2 obviously isn't where they wanted to be. There's a very real scenario where they're 5-0, and we're talking about a top 10 ranked TCU team right now, even at the rate that they have been playing, which says a lot about the state of college football this year. I don't think that they're look, and yes, message boards are going to always focus on stuff, especially in losses. There is, I don't think, from what I've been told, or the sense that I get when I talk to people around the program, there is not this like heightened level of strain or tension or anything that's anything more than when a team has just lost a couple games they probably shouldn't have lost. And they're kind of down on themselves and they're kind of saying, hey, we got to figure this crap out, right? Like there's always going to be a little bit of that in a loss. I don't think that there's anything extra. I really, truly don't. And so that's my thought there. Horned Frog 111. Is your over-under for a realignment announcement still set for the end of October? Do you still feel that TCU is in really good shape? I mean, I will feel that TCU is in really good shape because TCU is in really good shape. That has nothing to do with anything else that's maybe on the horizon here. TCU is in really good shape. And when I say TCU is in really good shape, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to leave the Big 12, right? Like all of the speculation out there about where teams could go or who they've been talking to or what's going to happen next or when is this Board of Regents meeting going to happen and all of that, nobody really knows. And I've said that on the board too. Nobody really knows. We know that we know two things about college football realignment. A lot of people are talking to a lot of people. We don't know how serious those conversations are. We just know that a lot of people are talking to a lot of people. And leaks are most of the time, if not the majority of the time, intentional, right? And so all the stuff that happened around Clemson, we knew that there were some conversations happening. You knew that I reported on the board some of those conversations were happening outside of TCU-centric realignment land, right? Other people were saying some similar things. Now it's quieted down. This is kind of how we've seen this play out time and time again over the last few years. There's a little bit of bubbling up. Oh, we better back it back down. We better tone it back down. Do I know if something's going to happen by the end of October? No, I have no idea. Was I more confident that something might happen sooner rather than later 3 weeks ago? Yeah, I was. But that's the shifting and changing the landscape. That's the nature of this kind of thing at this point. TCU ball 3. TCU football over the past 11 years has been boom or bust. In the transfer portal NIL era, what steps should Coach Dykes and staff take to become a more consistent winner? Is it even possible at TCU, or should we be resigned to boom and bust type seasons? Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but TCU has the 7th highest winning percentage in college football since 2000. That doesn't feel very boom or bust to me. They have, I think, 11 win seasons or better, 11 10-win seasons in the last 20 years, last 25 years. That doesn't feel very boom or bust to me. They had only missed a bowl game 3 times in Gary Patterson's tenure until the final year. That doesn't feel very boom or bust to me. 2 losses in a season isn't boom or bust, right? Maybe we have different definitions for boom. But I think TCU has been a pretty consistent winner over the last 23 years. So no, I don't think we should be resigned to boom or bust type seasons. What steps should Coach Dykes and staff take to become a consistent winner? I think there was another question about portal later on, but I'm not seeing it now, so I'm just going to say this here for this question. I think that with some of the changes that the NCAA just made to scholarships and the portal versus what we know kind of about high school recruiting, especially in the state of Texas, I think that there has to be an intentionality around recruiting really good high school players who you can develop and filling gaps with the portal. I don't think that you can forego either of those things. We've seen what happens if a team does, right? Clemson is sitting at 3-2 right now, and based on the kind of baseline expectation for Clemson football, they're fading, right? They're on the downslope a little bit. And I truly believe that part of that is because of Dabo Swinney's insistence that they don't use the transfer portal. He's fully and wholly against the transfer portal. He's pretty much against NIL as well, although I think he's given a little bit of ground there. And it's going to set you back. It's going to set you back in this day and age to not be intentional, but also to not be active in the transfer portal. On the other side of things, there's a reason Jake Spavital is not the head coach at Texas State anymore, and it's because he decided to swing in the other direction and completely forego high school recruiting in favor of the portal. And that has its own set of problems, right? Because then you don't have any kind of development pipeline for kids that are going to come through your school and develop over the course of 4 years, which is wildly possible to do at Texas State because of the richness of recruiting in the state of Texas. There should never be a D1 program in the state of Texas that forgoes recruiting in the state out of high school. There's so much talent and depth in this state that it was baffling, not only to me, but to everybody who follows recruiting, high school coaches in the state, other people who are in those circles, as to why Texas State took the approach that they did. G.J. Kinney is reversing course on that quite a bit. He still brought in a really good transfer class as well in year one. But you can't swing too far in either direction, is what I'm saying. You got to have a balance, and you have to be committed to developing kids and being intentional about who you bring in the portal, because you can't just go out and get 30 guys in the portal and expect everything to be okay, right? You just can't do that. It's not a recipe for success. It just isn't. Let's see here. Subterraneans. Why is recruiting dead AF, and how did we blow the national championship game appearance momentum this quickly? Well, I think that it kind of goes back to what I was just saying. I think that they have some guys that they really, really love in this recruiting class, right? And they've got some highly rated guys in this recruiting class. They have some lower rated guys that they evaluated and really like long term. That's where that idea of development comes in, right? You don't have to have a freshman class that all come out and start right away. You have to have good depth. You have to have guys that you can grow up and develop. And some of those kids are going to be projects. I think the other side of that, and this was, in my opinion, kind of what TCU was doing with the 2024 class before the NCAA just ripped the cap off of things. I think they were going to be very intentional about addressing some needs in the transfer portal. And they're still going to do that, right? And so there was this kind of maybe scholarship limitation navigation thing happening that obviously is no longer an issue. So I don't know. We still got 2.5 months until the early signing period. Let's just see what happens, right? Let's just see what happens between now and then. They've got some irons in the fire. I don't think recruiting is as dead as you guys think it is. Just because there isn't a bunch of noise around it doesn't necessarily mean that it's died out altogether. Frog. Question 1. Is Chandler dinged up? If no, then what else explains the 180 and escapability and running threat we saw in half 1 and half 2 Saturday? Might also explain why the throws reverted to prior inaccuracy. I have not heard anything about Chandler Morris being hurt. I have not heard anything about him being dinged up. I'm sure he's got some bumps and bruises. Most people do this time of season. I really think that the offensive line play got in his head. And I can't blame him. That was pretty bad offensive line play on Saturday. And we're going to get into some running back stuff as well. I pulled some running back blocking numbers. They weren't good against West Virginia. They simply were not. And so, yeah, when you think you're going to get hit, your clock speeds up and maybe you rush things a little bit too much. And I think that more than anything else explains what happened in the second half on Saturday. That being said, he's got to be better, right? The offensive line's got to be better. Chandler's got to be better. The receivers have to be better. The whole process has to be better on that side of the football. You can't just gain 1 yard in the third quarter and brush it off and say, well, we'll get him next time. You got to go back to the drawing board a little bit there. And I think they have this week. Question 2 from Frog. 5 games in, can you name the true freshman you expect or project will keep getting into the game logs versus those that will now sit and keep their red shirt? I noticed some that did not play in game 5. That's a good question. I'll be interested to see if Jamel Johnson keeps getting snaps. I'll be interested to see if Marcus Deal keeps getting snaps. I think Deal's a guy that they're probably going to plan on redshirting this year with as many snaps as we're seeing Sonny Misi get at this point. Trying to think who else. I guess the big question is Cordell Russell, right? I mean, when you've got Warren Thompson and Dalen Wright playing that same position, it's going to be hard to find meaningful snaps for a freshman. That's going to be the one to watch, I guess, because I think this is not something that I've talked to people about. This is just my kind of guesstimation based on what I've seen. I think the hope would be that they would just redshirt him now and not burn a year of his eligibility, knowing that he's third on the depth chart behind 2 pretty talented guys. 2 guys who know the playbook a little bit better at this point. That's definitely the key one to watch. As far as anybody else, I think Ben Taylor Whitfield's probably worked his way into the rotation, so we're going to see him the rest of the year, especially if Brandon Coleman continues to be banged up. So that's a freshman that's going to continue to play. Those are the ones that come to mind. Those are the ones that come to mind for me right now. Frogs. Not to be confused with Frog. Says pick one. TCU beats Oklahoma and UT but loses to Baylor, Tech, and Kansas State. Or TCU loses to OU and UT but beats Baylor, Tech, and Kansas State. Let's assume Frogs beat Iowa State and BYU. I don't think we should assume that, but for the sake of this project, give me beating Oklahoma and Texas on their way out of the conference, I guess. Right? That would be the one that I would pick, I suppose. What's more likely, TCU wins their remaining 7 games or Texas beats Oklahoma again 49-0? Are you saying TCU winning out or Texas beating OU 49-0? I would say that Texas beating OU 49-0 is probably the more likely of those two things. AGTHT asks, if we hold Iowa State to their current season average of 20 points, do we win this game? Yes. Is it 21-20? Maybe. Is it 35-20? Probably not. But I think if you hold Iowa State to 20, you're in pretty dang good shape. I don't think it'll be that hard to hold them to 20. I wouldn't be shocked if they held them to like 17. The Voyager 11. Does NIL influence coaches' decisions to play certain players? Is the leeway the coaches have allowed for certain players as a result of unconscious bias stemming from NIL, or is that conjecture? Man, that is a good question. I would be, and this is not a TCU specific answer, I want to clarify that. I would be shocked if you polled every coach anonymously in the country and they all came back and said that NIL did not influence who they played. Right? You're always recruiting your own team, and one of the best ways you can recruit players on your own team is by playing them and by paying them. But, NFL head coaches have to deal with it too. NBA coaches, MLB coaches, all of these coaches at the professional level also have to deal with this same thing. You got a big contract guy. Look at the Chargers, for instance. They just traded a cornerback back to the Patriots who they had signed to a deal last year. Randy Gregory, making $70 million over the life of a contract that he signed last offseason. Just got cut by the Denver Broncos, right? Money isn't everything, even at the professional level. And I think that ultimately wanting to win will outweigh who you play as a head coach. But I think it would be unreasonable to suggest that NIL never plays a factor in who's seeing playing time. Question 2 from the Voyager 11. Coach Jones said recently on the Sonny Dykes show that he thought Trent Battle is an NFL caliber back. If that's the case, why aren't we seeing more of him behind Amani? Is his blocking really that bad? Where are my numbers? I don't have them in front of me. I'm going to go back to PFF really quick. The short answer is yes. The short answer is yes. And that's not just a Trent Battle problem at this point. That's an entire running backs problem because TCU, over the last 2 weeks, has had some of the absolute worst running back blocking I think I've ever seen in my adult life. It has been brutally bad. Amani Bailey through 3 games was excellent as a pass blocker. Absolutely incredible. He did a phenomenal job of pass blocking. We're going to pull this up here, which is going to change how I look on screen. If you're watching on YouTube, I apologize. I'm very bright and shiny now. Let's do this. Amani Bailey. Let's go to his. Oh, wait. I'm in the wrong tab. I'm in the NFL tab. Give me Amani Bailey. Here he is. Let's go to blocking. Pass blocking grades. Colorado 67.9. Nichols 71.5. Houston 76.1. SMU 9. West Virginia 42.3. His pass blocking grade for the entire year, based on number of opportunities to pass block, is 39.5. Let's go to Trey Sanders. Trey Sanders against Colorado, 75.4. Pretty good. Against Nichols, 24.1. He had no pass blocking grade against Houston. His pass blocking grade against SMU was a 15.8. His pass blocking grade against West Virginia was a 0. His pass blocking grade for the season, 12.4. This is out of 100, by the way, folks. Out of 100. Now let's go to Trent Battle. Against Colorado, 70. Against Nichols, 72.6. Against Houston, 21.1. Also not great. No opportunities against SMU or West Virginia. His pass blocking grade for the year is 35.4. Now, it's a small sample size, but Cam Cook, he had a pass blocking grade of 70 against West Virginia. Not too bad. Pretty good grade. the thing is that all of these running backs have to block better. And until someone steps up and blocks better, and I've been saying this all season, right? Until someone decides that they're just going to be Amari DiMercato and that's going to be the thing that they do really, really well, Amani Bailey is going to continue to be the feature back on this team because he has proven himself to be the best runner and the best pass catcher of the bunch. If someone wants to step up and be the dude who they can trust on third down to block for Chandler Morris, especially when the offensive line is breaking down as frequently as it has been, that dude's going to get the second snaps. That dude's going to get RB2 snaps. It's just that simple. Someone has to step up and do it consistently. None of them have. None of them have. And I agree with Coach Jones, by the way. I think Trent Battle, you guys know how much stock I own in Trent Battle at this point. I am not selling that crap. I love the kid. I think he's got all the potential in the world. You got to block people. You got to block people. It's so critically important for running backs these days. Look, there's this whole national narrative about the value of running backs right now. And if you're a running back in college, if you're a running back in high school, I would be doing everything I could possibly do to prove my worth in other ways than just tucking the ball and running it between the tackles. Because that's what's going to change this running back value narrative, is when they step up better in the passing game consistently and when you block and protect the guy who's throwing the ball. That's how you change the narrative around running backs. It's by pass blocking. Someone's got to step up for TCU and do it better than what has been done, especially in the last two games. It's been pretty tough. But hey, Cam Cook looked pretty good running the ball. And if he's going to block well, anything can happen. WL Royal, rate the Big 12 home field advantages. I feel like TCU has to be bottom half of that list. Aside from Texas and OU games, I feel like we rarely ever have full stadiums with loud fans that actually make it a difficult place for an opponent to play. Also, for as long as I can remember, referees kill us at home. Thoughts? TCU's had pretty good attendance this year. I was impressed by TCU against Colorado and SMU. Those were the two most attended games in TCU's in A.M.G. Carter history. I think TCU fans have done a really good job of showing up this year. West Virginia was a little bit of an oddity. I don't know if a lot of people had stuff going on that night or what it was. It did feel a little flat, but I think TCU fans have shown out a tremendous amount this year for the home team. I think that Iowa State fans always go ballistic for their team. I've heard Cincinnati is a fantastic place to go attend a football game. BYU is the same. You talk about schools coming in. Utah's another really, really tough place to play. I went up there for the Ross Evans game. That was my I was still an undergrad at that point, for those of you that are old enough to remember Ross Evans. That stadium was electric. That was one of the most fun college atmospheres I've ever been a part of. Very excited for them to be part of the conference again as well. Central Florida shows out. I think there are a lot of really, really good atmospheres in the Big 12. And I think on a good day, TCU's got one of the better ones. I truly do. Oh, Texas Tech looked fire against Oklahoma in the stands, not on the field. As long as I can remember, referees kill us at home. Yeah, officiating's just rough, man. And I have this kind of working theory about why that kind of is and why it's getting worse. And I think it's just because of the general abuse that refs face in every sport. Why do you want to pursue that profession? I think we're chasing off folks who could be really good referees just by making them absolutely, completely miserable all the time. One ref that does need to get chased off, though, is Angel Hernandez, because that guy, worst umpire in baseball. All right, 2017 Frog says, do we win more than 2 games to end the year, i.e. from now until the end? And if so, which ones? Yes, I think they win on Saturday night against Iowa State. I think they beat Baylor in Fort Worth. I think they go to Texas Tech and win at Lubbock. BYU's going to be a coin flip for me right now. Right, this isn't a sky is falling situation just because you've lost a couple games and the team has taken a step back from last year. We got to take some deep breaths, y'all. We got to take some deep breaths. Also, if we lose either of our next two, how alarmed should we be? I think that we should really have realistic conversations about what this year's iteration of TCU football will be. Will it be a bowl team? Will it be a 5-7 team? BYU is pretty good. They went to Fayetteville and beat Arkansas. Whatever you think of Arkansas. They went to Cincinnati and beat Cincinnati by 14 points or something like that. Or 7 points. 8 points, somewhere around there. They're a good team and they're a good team on the road. TCU gets them in 2 weeks, 2:30 in the afternoon for homecoming, by the way. We'll see. I don't know that this is a 5-fire alarm or anything like that if TCU loses one of the next two. I think that I'll have to reevaluate how I evaluate this team during the offseason, that's for sure, because I was pretty high on this thing. But I don't know that this is a sound the alarms kind of situation. How is it even possible to have 1 yard of offense in a 15-minute quarter? Brother TRF 51, I do not know. All I can say is that this was the perfect weekend for me to go to a fall wedding. Perfect one. Go to fall weddings, by the way. My 2 cents there. TRF 51 also asks, how big is it for Bryles to show us something going forward? Look, I think there are opportunities for Kendall Bryles to grow as an offensive coordinator. I think Sonny has named some of those in the last week or so during his press stuff. I like a lot of what I see in theory from Kendall Bryles' offense. I really, truly do. It's one of those things where, and I think I called it out on Twitter a couple weeks ago, the play design on against SMU in the first quarter on a pass that, if it had been accurate, was a Trent Battle touchdown, is some of the coolest stuff I've seen on offense in a while. Like, the design was just really done well, right? And we've seen a lot of that kind of stuff from his offense this year. A lot of really nice play designs. I think that sometimes the play calling can be better. I think that sometimes it's okay to slow down. I don't think that you always have to go at the fastest tempo possible, although I understand how that strains the defense and how that keeps a defense from subbing. I think sometimes it's better to have all of your ducks in a row than to try and keep the other team off balance. I think in those situations, talent will bear out. And I think that from a talent perspective, TCU is still in pretty good shape. But yeah, yes, I think it's big for every assistant on this staff, and it's big for Sonny Dykes to show us stuff going forward, right? Like, this isn't a pressure-free job, right? This isn't a job that you just have forever, right? It's not a seat on the Supreme Court. So they've got to consistently show people stuff, right? They've got to consistently show that they can put a winner together. That the pressure's not any greater because they're 3-2 right now. Similar to what I was saying earlier, like about the tension in the team and all that kind of stuff. Losing sucks and people don't like it, but it's not like they're going to lose twice and fully freak out and light the building on fire either. Do they have some things to clean up? Yes. Do I think that they will get it cleaned up? Also, yes. TRF also says, I know Sonny is a CEO-type leader who hires people and lets them do their job, but what happens when the guy he hired is failing to produce? How long will it take for Sonny to take over the play calling? He's not going to take over the play calling this year. Unless something incredibly dramatic happens in the last 7 games, Sonny Dykes is not going to take over play calling. Like I said earlier when we were talking about Eckel rate, this team has strung together good drives pretty consistently. They've got to find a way to get better at producing points from those drives, but the bones are there. They got to get better in a couple places, but this isn't failure is a strong word at this point in time, a very strong word. I think that there are ways to improve. That much is very clear. Sonny Dykes has said as much, but failing to produce is a little too harsh, I think, at this point in time. And then TRF, he keeps going. Can you talk to the damage that has been done to the perception of our program and its brand? Take away the CU game, the viewership has not been great. It seems like we are dropping the bag literally when we were in position to explode in growth. I still don't think that there's been this like dramatic program damaging thing that's happened. They lost 2 games, right? Clemson's lost 2 games this year. A lot of teams have lost 2 games this year. Clemson got the brakes beat off of them on national TV when they were the only game going. You think that was something that damaged their reputation or their product? No, people bashed on them a little bit for it. People bashed on TCU for losing to Colorado a little bit. But I don't think there has been no great offense done to the TCU football program because they've lost 2 games by 3 points each. It just hasn't. Have they been as good as they were last year? No. Has the luck been bouncing in their favor as much as it did last year? Also, no. Right? There was a little luck involved. And I'm going to get smoked for saying this. There was a little luck involved in TCU's undefeated regular season last year. There had to be. To be able to come back like that against Baylor in the final seconds, everything has to be flawless. You have to be able to, you want to talk about that final third down that Baylor had with the ball and the decision that Blake Shapen made in that moment? Is that not a little bit of a lucky break for TCU? Absolutely it is. Is it not a little bit of a lucky break for TCU to get 2 pick sixes against Michigan? Absolutely it is. It was also a little bit of a bad break on the play calling at the goal line in the Big 12 championship, right? There's a lot that these coaches can control, and there's a lot that they can't. And we're starting to see a little bit of that luck kind of revert to the mean this year. And it's not fun, but it's also the reality. I mean, you look at what happened the year Baylor won the conference and then the year later, right? These things swing from game to game, from season to season. There has not been any kind of significant damage done to TCU's program or the brand or anything like that. There just hasn't been. As much as some folks almost seemingly want it to be that way, it has not. That is simply not the truth or the reality of the situation. TCU Wags, what's up, man? With all of your technology and football knowledge, do you think AI has a role to play in developing a game plan? Maybe have a little robot over on the sidelines in front of a big green poster signaling in plays. Okay, the first part of this question, I think the answer is that it's already happening. You talk about Jeff Jordan, TCU's analytics guy, and the big binder that he follows Sonny Dykes with around on the sideline. All of that is data that has been culled by this company that does algorithms to say, hey, in these situations, this is the decision you should make or can make or need to make. All of that is similar kind of data processing to what AI does. It's just not happening in real time in the moment. There are programs that you can use on an iPad to punch in what's happening in-game in real time, and it will spit out for you real odds about the decisions that you should make in 4th and 1 in a certain situation, 3rd and 2 in a certain situation, right? Field goal or punt or go for it or whatever. There is a system already out there that will do that for you. And so AI kind of already has a role in developing a game plan from that standpoint, from a decision-making standpoint. I don't know that we're ever going to have robot play callers, but I think it would be hilarious, and I think a really rich program in Dallas could afford to try it because, hey, they're not winning football games anyways, right? So you might as well. J.C. Watner, is 2023's team an inverse of last year's team? We're 3-2, 0-2 in one-score games. Are we the same level talent-wise but just unclutch? This is kind of what I was going back to earlier about the luck stuff, about the bounces kind of hitting in your favor, right? This team is a good team, right? They are good quality talented players on this team. And I think Sonny Dykes nailed it in his midweek press conference this week when he said, last year, TCU had some playmakers who could cover up some mistakes, right? There were moments where Max Duggan covered up a broken blocking scheme. There were moments where Kendre Miller covered up some mistakes on offense, or Quentin Johnston covered up some mistakes, or D. Winters and Dylan Horton covered up some mistakes defensively for this team. Trey Hodges-Tomlinson also big factor there. And I just don't know that the guys behind them have grown into those roles yet, right? And that's reasonable. That's you're not just going to have a Heisman finalist every single year, unless you're, Ohio State or a Lincoln Riley quarterback or something. But, I don't think it's unreasonable to say that this team is talented, but they don't have some guys that can kind of cover up some of the mistakes quite yet. That's kind of where I think we're landing right now. And then the final question from ZJ High Roller. Is this offense limited by A, Chandler Morris's deep ball ability, B, inconsistent OL play, C, a carousel approach to wide receiver lineup, or D, lack of leadership, quote, he got that frog in him, end quote, attitude? I would say line play and the carousel at wide receiver are probably the two biggest ones at this point. I think outside of a couple moments in the second half on Saturday and a little bit against Colorado, Chandler Morris has been pretty good all year, right? I mean, he's pressured the second most of any quarterback in the Big 12, and he's still completing passes at a pretty high rate. He's running the ball well right now. He still can do some better things as far as decision making goes, but I think a lot of his quick decisions are influenced by an expectation of having not enough time to get through your reads, and that's the offensive line. The offensive line has struggled quite a bit at times this year. It's looked good at other times too. If there's some more consistency there, I think the offense takes a big step forward. And the same thing goes for wide receivers. We're still waiting for a couple guys to step up. And, you know, I don't know who it's going to be at this point, but it needs to be somebody, and it needs to be somebody quick. It needs to be somebody quick. I don't think TCU needs to keep completing passes to 10 or 11 or 12 guys every single game. 5 is fine. 6 is fine. Spread out your targets between the guys who you know are going to be where they need to be on time within the play, who are going to catch the football, and who are going to do the other things that you need from your receivers too, like block on the edges when a running back's coming their way. So that's kind of where I am right now, B and C. Thank you all for your questions. Those were awesome. Appreciate everybody who took the time to comment on that thread in Horned Frog Blitz in the message boards. If you're not a member over at HFB, I can't stress enough how much you should sign up and get into the conversation over there. We're doing some really cool stuff. Jeremy obviously is the #1 leader when it comes to covering TCU football recruiting. I've got some stuff in there about hoops and baseball coming up. Baseball started practice this week. I think I mentioned that earlier. We're going to dive into this roster. We're going to have some conversations with Kirk Sarlos coming up as well. It's going to be awesome. All the content you could possibly hope for hoops, for baseball, for football. We run the gamut. I saw someone starting a women's soccer thread the other day. There's been conversations about TCU women's volleyball, right? Like TCU athletics is at a high point right now. And if you want to talk about it, get over to Horned Frog Blitz. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you to all of our listeners. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Hit the like on this video if you're watching on YouTube. Thank you again to Levi for previewing Iowa State with Melissa, and thank you to Melissa as well for getting all of that taken care of. We'll be back on Monday morning with our recap of TCU and Iowa State, but until then, we'll talk to you next time, and go Frogs.